Welcome everyone. It's Steve McClatchy here from American Property Partners and Loans USA. Welcoming to our third webinar, which we're very excited to be hosting today for you. Our initial strategy was going around Australia doing workshops and masterclasses, but we've decided this year to start to do more webinars so we can reach more people more regularly. One of our big pushes, I suppose, is education. We don't want anyone buying property or investing in America until they're 100% confident of what they're doing and where they're doing it. And one of those, I suppose, big pushes we've had is to bring on an expert from America to help our clients. And his name's Mikesell, and he's located in Charlotte, North Carolina. He's bought over 500 properties himself. He's renovated them, he's managed them, he's leased them, and he's maintained them. So he brings an enormous amount of expertise to the marketplace over the last 15 years, and we're very, very happy that he's been able to come on board full-time with us and work with our clients over the last 6 months. One of the other things he's been doing is also hosting our tours, which we try to have 3 or 4 of those a year. We've got another one coming up towards the end of the year now. Today, Sky's going to be talking to us about what's a good deal, how to sift through all the offerings out in the marketplace to work out what's going to be right for you. And as you start to work with our companies, you'll find out that we're about strategy and structure. We're not about pushing properties down people's throats, unlike others you may find, but we're about getting a right plan in place, getting a strategy and a structure, and then moving forward from there. So today, our webinar, we're going to try and hold it to 30 minutes as the content, and then questions and answers are after that. And we encourage you to write questions as you go along in the right-hand side. You'll be able to write those questions in there, and we'll endeavour to answer all those for you on the webinar. We will be making the webinar available to everyone afterwards. So you'll get a link to be able to watch it when you want to. And we'll be having another webinar coming up in a month's time, and that's going to be on the topic of financing. I haven't done one on that yet, but we've got some phenomenal options now for clients that we've got all over the world in terms of how to finance your way to wealth. And that's what it's all about. It's hard to save, but it's easy to finance and build your wealth that way. So that's going to be a very exciting topic next up about that. What I'm going to do now is hand it over to Sky, and he's going to take you through today's content, and hopefully you enjoy it, and it helps you with your strategy and structure as to how to find that deal that's going to work for you. So I'll hand it over to Sky, and all the best for now.
All right. Well, thank you, Stephen. Well, thanks again for joining us this afternoon. Welcome to the webinar. Well, tonight, or today for you, we're reviewing what a good deal is. So for the sake of time, we're going to keep this webinar pretty much to the point, and we're going to go ahead and jump right in. So you should be able to see my screen. If you cannot see my screen, you can go ahead and start texting me, and I will be watching. So, all right. So first off, congratulations. You've made the decision. You're an investor now. So this means that you are going to invest your money in a plan, with an intentional plan to basically better your future. This sounds like a cliche. Well, I guess for most investors, it may sound that way, but most investors make plans. In some cases, investors invest so the money that they have is being treated better than just a normal savings account. In other cases, they are investing for the future of their money and the future of their own life. Maybe part of you wants to invest as you plan for your retirement, or so you can replace your current income. In order to do this, we have to find something to invest in. Well, you've made the decision that something is real estate, right? Well, let's drill down. So you're now looking at real estate. You're talking to an Australian company that focuses on USA real estate. The question is, when you get that first property through, how will you know if that property is a good deal? Well, first and foremost, we have to have a baseline. I'm sure you've heard this word baseline before. It is you've heard it used in maybe baseball, the sport. You hear it probably most often in the medical profession. It's now become part of our common nomenclature. Let me read to you how Webster's dictionary defines the word baseline. The word baseline is defined as a set of critical observations or data used for comparison or a control. Sounds really boring. A set of critical observations or data used for comparison. In some schools now here in the U.S., they're giving baseline testing to these student athletes of the way their brain basically the way their brain works. So if these student athletes at some point experience a concussion or an injury in their respective sport, they can retake the same baseline test, and because they have a baseline to compare to, they will know what is normal and whether or not a recovery has occurred. So you're wondering, how in the world does all this medical jargon apply to you? Well, first off, we need to figure out what your baseline is. I'm not referring to you getting a concussion in real estate, although that is probably possible, but I'm referring to you deciding a baseline of what is a good deal for you. We have to know what a good deal is for us to know whether we are getting one. That would be the assumption, right? So, for example, if someone is selling you a condo in the CBD for $200,000 less than the value of the property, is that a good deal? If a property 2 hours outside of CBD is promising a 30% plus return annualized after 3 years, is that a good deal? If a rental property is renting for $800 a month and selling for only $50,000, is that a good deal? Well, the answer is yes. All three of them qualify as good deals. However, the question is, do all three of them qualify as a good deal for you? The answer is no. Maybe you don't want to live inside CBD, even if it is discounted by $200,000. Maybe you want an investment to be in an area where the income for the area is not relying on just one source, like a factory or a mine. So we need to figure out what your baseline comparison is. What is a good deal for you? So remember, a baseline is your criteria. This is your criteria for investing. So on the graph, your baseline is your constant good deal, the deal you're always looking for. And when it comes, you know without thinking that this is the right one for you. So you must decide. There's things in an investment that are important to you. What are those things that are important to you in any investment? So let's list out a few different options. Liquidity. How easily is it for you to be able to get rid of that property if you ever had to get out of it? The stability of a property. Is the property in a stable, predominantly owner-occupied area? Is it a stable area? If you have to be able to sell, is it stable enough to sell? Is it stable enough that tenants are going to want to move into this area? What type of quality is this house built with? Was it recently renovated, or is it new construction? And if it is new construction, who built it and how well did they build it? All of these questions we're asking. Capital growth. Is this a capital growth area? We don't have a crystal ball, but we got some data to support capital growth in certain areas. Or is this a property that, or is part of your criteria return on investment and or cash flow? Are these your criterias? These are five, 6 different criterias, and you can probably come up with a few more. The question I always have to ask myself is, how detailed does my personal baseline criteria need to be? Is it a 20-point baseline criteria so I know when I'm getting a good deal? Years ago, I used to work with this realtor, 15 years ago, believe it or not, and when I worked with this realtor, when she would put people into her car, she'd always ask them she'd look over and say, well, give me the top 10 things that you want in a property for your family. And naturally and quickly, they would give her the list, and she would look at it and say, okay, great. If we can get you any 5 out of those 10 things on your list, we're going to be doing great. Because the reality is, she knew she was never going to be able to get 10 for 10. That was just the reality. There was not a property out there that met the 10 for 10 needs of the people that looking. So I'm of the same school of thought. If you can look at these 5 or 6 different criterias, and maybe some of your own, and you come up with the top 2, maybe 3 that are the most important to you, that alone is the start of your baseline criteria. If you get those 2 criterias, when you find that deal, you know you got a good deal. There's no question. If you get 3 of them, unequivocally, you know you have a great deal on your hands because these are your criterias. So here you are. You've basically arrived. You've got your top 2 or 3 criterias. You know what they are. You're working through that. You've got a baseline now. You will know a good deal when you actually find one. So a good deal comes across your desk, you've got your baseline criteria, it gets cross-referenced through that baseline, and now you know you've got a deal. So what happens? Now that you've got this fantastic baseline of criteria, you've decided arbitrarily that our return on investment and stability are your your top two criterias, and every property that you find has to meet those criterias, or it's not a deal that fits you. So what happens when the king of all deals comes across your desk? This deal, as you look at it, you tell yourself, you know what? I'm looking at the numbers, and there's no way that these numbers can be wrong. These are what I like to describe as temptation purchases. You know, I've heard my wife tell me a few times, you can look at the menu as long as you don't buy from it. Real estate is very much the same. We are keen investors. We want to invest. We want to invest in good deals. We feel our heart really pumping when we have the potential of investing in a great deal. You know, in real estate, just like marriage, temptations are actually not a great thing. So let me share with you an experience I personally had about 8 years ago. Closer to 10 years ago now. I bought two houses side by side. Each one of these houses was $6,250 each. For a grand total of $12,500, I owned two houses, single-family homes, side by side. These houses were in deplorable condition. Each house needed about $35,000 in renovations to make them even rent-ready. All of the houses in this area were renting for about $750 a month. You know, I looked at these numbers. I of course knew I could handle the $12,000 to $13,000 I needed to buy them. That wasn't too difficult. I realized that as I reviewed the list of the renovations I had, that I had the experience and the skills to manage this renovation process. I did my math, and when I put all my numbers into my fancy little spreadsheet, guess what it told me? It told me, Sky, there's absolutely no way you can go wrong with this deal. Well, let me tell you the end of the story, which ended about 2 years later, with me selling off each property just to get the heck out of them. At the end of that time, I had invested nearly $48,000 per property, most of this due to vandalism and vacancy issues. This was an area that when I bought it, I knew this area was a bad area of town. I didn't go in with my eyes closed. My eyes were open. I knew it was a bad area of town. I knew that other folks in the city referred to this area as the war zone neighborhood. I knew that average vacancies in this area were running on minimum 3 to 4 months, upwards of 5 to 6 months per year. But guess what? My spreadsheet told me all of these things about the numbers, and so because of that, I didn't care about all of those other things. I figured there's no way I could be going wrong when paying such little money for this property. I was tempted. I fell to that temptation and purchased these properties, and in the next 2 years invested that $48,000 per property, and guess what? Ended up selling each one of them for right around $30,000 a piece just to escape the headache. You know, there's always going to be that temptation purchase that comes across your plate as an investor. A deal that is a great deal on paper, a deal that will make your baseline criteria actually seem unimportant, like you never had it to begin with. I would like to serve as your reminder and my lovely experience to stay focused. Remember, you're the one who chose this baseline criteria. Once you finalize that baseline criteria, nobody else chose it for you. We're not telling you what your baseline criteria should be. You're deciding this criteria. And once you choose it, you get to hold to it. Your criteria today might be different 5 or 10 years from now, but for today, for your investing, you decide what your criteria is. So if you don't mind, I'm going to digress a little bit, and we'll actually talk about some real-life current examples of temptation purchases that are out there and waiting to tease us across our desk at any given moment. So this is a good one. Let me share with you the kind of the blatant, in-your-face temptation purchase that's out there right now. You know, this one's been around for a number of years. This one's a little bit more obvious than some of the others, so we'll start with the easy one. Maybe you've heard of this city here in the U.S., Detroit, in the state of Michigan. It's Detroit, Michigan. Some people refer to it as Motor City. It's the headquarters for the founder of cars. That's Ford Motor Company. Was and still is the #1 city for car manufacturing. You know, I get calls on almost a weekly basis of houses in this city I can buy for anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000. Sounds great. And on paper, all this sounds like a great deal. You know, anytime you're talking about real estate, there's this magic number with temptation purchases. When you can buy an entire house for under $50,000, all the facts about that property start going out the window. Facts like the area is a complete war zone. Facts like if you attract a tenant to this property, will they be a good tenant? Or the fact that the house needs so much work, what else will you find once you start renovating? These are just some of the warning signs of that temptation purchase. Here's the fact. 80% of the city of Detroit you would not want to live in with your family. I generally don't make broad brush statements like Detroit is one of those places where the market is so bad nearly everywhere, even when you can find a good area to invest in, the surrounding circumstances don't warrant the investment. This city is challenged, and I'm not saying that for anyone to hurt anyone's feelings that has mistakenly and temptationally invested in Detroit, Michigan, but I'm simply speaking the facts about, you know, a temptation purchase like Detroit where property prices are so low that the facts go out the window and your baseline criteria gets ignored. I've got another one. So I've been getting calls, mostly emails actually, recently. There's a state here in the U.S. Called North Dakota. You probably have heard of it. Maybe you haven't. It's not a real popular state here. And North Dakota, right now there's a major oil boom going on in North Dakota. There are emails being blasted internationally, I would imagine, to everybody who they deem as an investor. This oil boom is it's going crazy. The returns being promised are anywhere from 30 to 35% net return is what they're promising. You know, they're citing employers such as ExxonMobil, Halliburton, British Petroleum. They're saying all of these employers are there and drilling for oil. The return sounds fantastic. The employers, all of these employers sound very stable. Well, here's the issue. Let's stop and look at this deal. We've got to stop and make some observations. We've got to stop and ask some critical questions. Some of those observations. Well, first off, North Dakota is a remote state with not a single major city. The winters here in North Dakota are cold and harsh. The largest housing builders in the United States that build new construction housing are refusing to go there and begin developing despite the rumored demand of housing needs. Why are people not responding to this temptation? There are 15,000 oil and service workers that need housing, and yet nobody is building it for them. Why is that? Well, if you're not sure if this deal is on your baseline, then and this deal doesn't match up with anything on your baseline, and so therefore it might be a temptation because well, it's my baseline was a single-family home. Yeah, this isn't a single-family home, but it's a completely different deal. Well, you've still got to ask the critical baseline observation questions. If you don't have a baseline for this, then you look for the baseline. The baseline for this type of deal is, you've got to go back to our definition. I'll bore you one more time. Remember, our definition of a baseline is a set of critical observations or data used for comparison. So let's look back. We have a baseline for North Dakota. In the early 1900s, textile mills in Europe and the United States were on the rise. The amount of workers needed to work 6 days a week, 12 hours per day, was astronomical. In this scenario, all of these mills, most of these textile mills, believed, number one, in the real estate market around them, and number two, in their businesses enough to build the housing, sometimes with their own cash, and most of the time with borrowing money from banks. With this as our baseline, we have to ask, why are the large oil companies not participating in building and housing needed for their endeavor? Well, there's a few reasons. This is not the first time this has happened in North Dakota. In the 1950s, and then again in the 1980s, there was this huge surge of oil activity. Many national and local banks rushed in, gave loans, and when the workers left, it left that debt on the bank's books. There's banks still in the primary town where the oil was being drilled and is being drilled now that still have debt on their books all the way back from the last 1980s oil boom in North Dakota. Like most mining towns, families actually aren't relocating here. One spouse is normally going there to work. They live in a modest apartment and send their income back to the family. So the demand for single-family housing at this point is just arbitrary. At this point, families have not expressed the interest in relocating due to this geographic location. So, here's the deal. There's no doubt somebody is making money in North Dakota, and someone will make money on a deal similar to this one. There's no doubt that this is a good deal for someone that has that baseline criteria as this oil and gas deal. Maybe their money is a little bit more patient than my money is. The question is something of this speculation meeting up with your investment criteria? So, moral of the story is, if you don't have a baseline, you've got to ask the critical questions in order to get one. So, you've got to see a few of the examples. One of the examples we sent across most recently was we sent in an email to you. You may have got it. And we wanted to actually just take a few minutes and take you through this example and share with you with a bit more to explain it, our thought process, what we're looking for when we're asking those critical questions to match up with our baseline criteria. So some of the flags that we go through, and we'll just run through them one at a time. So first off, this flyer we received from it was sent out by another company to their client database, and we of course got a copy of it. So first off, the full address of this property is not listed. Why not? There's a reason for it. Is there not research that they want done on this property? So let's move on past that. Based on the picture and age of this property, the roof is obviously due for replacement. Again, we can do our math and figure out a roof is getting replaced every 20 to 30 years and figure out that this one's about due up again. This house is a pretty old house. This is a 2-bedroom, 1-bath. This fact was fully disclosed when they sent this flyer out. Unless this property is in the CBD of this local Kansas City town, it's not likely to attract a high-caliber tenant due to its size. 2-bedroom, 1-bath generally attract more of a transient tenant, not one that's going to move in and stay, not one of homeowner quality. When you start looking at the net yield figure, the math just doesn't work out. So, based on the figures indicated, we're looking at, number one, the insurance cost wasn't calculated in. The repairs wouldn't quite be enough, so that number's somewhat dodgy. And basically, we're looking at a property that's 84 years old. So, numbers have to be figured out a little bit differently in order to get a proper net yield. So, this house has got pretty limited living space. It will basically restrict the type of and quantity of tenants attracted to this property. It's a smaller house with not a lot of bedrooms, therefore not a lot of interests are going to be going into it. So, again, 84-year-old property. We have to look at everything to do with this property. Obviously, a property of age, I think, scares anybody. It makes everybody a little bit uncomfortable. I personally have never feared buying older properties. What I fear is buying properties with bad renovation jobs. So on any property, whether it's a 10-year-old property or an 84-year-old property, the questions have to be asked. What type of work was done on this property? Is there a new roof? Is there new aircon? Is there a new water heater? What was done on the inside? What was done on the outside? Is this house mechanically sound? Is it going to cost me more money after I buy it than it did in order to buy it? So these are legitimate questions which we can get answered during the financing process. So what we don't want is we don't want to go into a house that had a shoddy renovation done to it, and therefore it costs more money after you buy it than it does once at the very beginning when you first started. So rent on this property is actually below $700 a month. It's usually here in the U.S., if you're finding rents below $700 a month, these are usually lower socioeconomic neighborhoods. A lot of times these neighborhoods are experiencing some sort of government assistance program. Oftentimes with government assistance programs, the tenants are not allowed to have jobs. Otherwise, government assistance doesn't come into place. It's a really funny system that way, and most of them don't have jobs to begin with. So it's not generally, our belief is that somebody that's paying for their property is normally taking care of their property, and so with government assistance on a low-end house, we always worry about the repairs that are going to be required in years to come on lower-end properties. So, the repair figure listed here, as far as annual repairs, is just really unrealistic for this age of property. Some of that could possibly be answered in this one with the type of renovations that were done to it. If it has new aircon, then we know that's not an expense down the road, but nonetheless, they're on an inner city property like this, that's a smaller house, older house, our experience has just been that we see repairs much higher than those that were projected. So there's tax figures here. This is council rates. In here, the tax figure is pretty low. One of the things that we can do is we can call and verify this tax figure for accuracy. If it is actually accurate, this I almost wish it wouldn't be accurate, because this could potentially means that this is just an area of town where the city is offering, the council rate is offering a tax abatements to get people to move into this area. So, basically at this price point, if you haven't figured out from the last 9 points that this is a small house in a lower socioeconomic neighborhood with a high chance of vacancy and increased maintenance, and obviously challenges with the exit strategy for all of those reasons. So, properties of this size and location generally don't experience a lot of capital growth, and they don't generally attract the same type of homeowner that another property would. So, anytime we've got a property coming across, we've got to ask the critical questions about this property. And these critical questions are not to overanalyze something, but to figure out whether or not it matches up with our baseline. So here's my personal take as we come close to wrapping this up. Look, I'm a keen investor. I love finding good deals. I love investing. I personally am often guilty of looking for reasons to invest, not the reasons not to invest. There's a healthy balance to be achieved. A good friend of mine always used to tell me, he said, Sky, the deal of the lifetime comes around every 10 minutes. Meaning there'll always be another deal that comes along. He didn't say this to encourage paralysis on buying, but to say don't make a bad decision on buying just because you want to buy. Having your baseline criteria will help you quickly qualify the houses or duplexes or whatever it is that you're buying. It'll help you qualify those and help you decide if you want to move forward and buy, or eliminate the distractions of the properties that don't fit that criteria. A criteria will either help you decide or help you eliminate very quickly. There's going to be properties out there that on paper look fantastic, but it is up to you to hold that line. This is your criteria. You have to hold the line. So where do we begin? Well, obviously there's a start line for every Walker race, and you're at the starting blocks right now. Some of you are, at least. Here's the deal. Everyone has a baseline for their investment criteria. Yours may be different than what it was 5 years ago, and frankly, it'll probably be different than 5 years from now, what it is now. So all that we work through together in effort to get you an accurate baseline for you cannot possibly be covered in one webinar. There's no way I can talk with you in 30 minutes and help you establish a baseline. I've given you just quick points to help you establish and get your paradigm pointing in the right direction. If you want to meet by phone or Skype and have a one-on-one, I'd be happy to hear about where you are now and where you're kind of looking to go. If investing is not right for you, trust me, I will tell you that investing is not right for you. I've never believed in high pressure sales. I firmly believe that here, what we sell is a product that sells itself, which basically means I get to focus on working with you and your portfolio. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually end this webinar right now, and what we're going to do is allow for the next 15 minutes. You can go ahead and text in questions, and also welcome you if you want to text in a couple of different times that work for you to get together for a one-on-one. I'd love to be able to talk with you. So if you've got questions now, we're having to open up. You're welcome to text those questions in, and we'll do our best to answer them. So we are exactly 30 some minutes into the webinar, which is what we wanted to hold it to for you. And so if you've got questions, please feel free to go ahead and bring them on in right now, or if you want to go up and set up a time, you're welcome to send that in as well. So any questions? Baseline criteria? All right, we got a quiet group tonight. I don't, or for you guys, your afternoon. So all right, well, I don't have anything further to cover. Stephen, would you like to join in with anything you've got to cover?
Yeah, hi, Sky. Look, that's sort of covered it. What our aim is with these webinars is to just continue to educate our database on what we do and how we do it, and to really get people understanding the differences between properties. That one of the reasons I asked Sky to put this one together is especially about this Dakota drilling. I've been asked a number of times whether we offer this option to clients and whether it's a good deal. And I myself, the only one of the main reasons I got involved in the American side of things was because I wanted cash flow positive properties, and I didn't want to invest in mining towns in Australia. I don't like the idea of a one-horse town, and Sky gave a fantastic overview then of the situation in these mining towns. And if anyone's looked at these Dakota oil drilling ventures, you're basically buying a studio shack in a tin iron corrugated sort of building, which is purpose built for a short period of time. Certainly none of our financiers will lend against, and that's part of our rule of thumb. If we can't find a loan now for a property, then we wouldn't even ask our clients to look at this as a possible venture. So we certainly only look for properties which can be financed now, not potentially in the future, and that's certainly held our clients in good stead. I think there's a few questions coming through now, Sky, for you.
Stephen, I'm going to let you jump in on this one, and I'll just share with everyone on the call briefly. One of the questions that has come in is it difficult for non-residents to gain finance in the U.S.? I'll share with you that prior to working with Stephen, I've known Stephen for about 3 years now. I've worked with a number of international clients, and finance has always been the challenge. Stephen has always worked hard in lining up financing, and this is his area of expertise amongst his other areas of knowing the U.S. market. So, Stephen, I'd love it if you'd answer this question on financing.
Yeah, thanks, Guy. That's certainly my passion, is the finance, and for those of you who know me, Loans Australia, and Australia is our main business, which is based in finance. Look, finance is difficult for foreigners. Certainly when I started doing this back in 2010, it was very, very difficult, and I was told it can't be done. After some research and meeting some people over there, we've built quite a big network of lenders now across America. It is very unlike investing and financing in Australia. In Australia, pretty much every lender will lend all over Australia. In America, it's the complete opposite. There are not many lenders who will lend nationally. Most of the lenders are geographically based or only lend in certain areas, generally where they have branches on the whole. This topic is quite large, and I don't have the time now to go into a huge amount of detail, but let me just say that every property that we would find in all the areas we're focused on, which our website will tell you, we can get lending on. The type of lending varies dramatically. Certainly in the next webinar, we're going to go in depth into what lending's available, what the criteria is, how you get approved. One of the most exciting things that we've come across, we've just been approved for a new product which is aimed at foreigners. And this product we can lend in 17 different states across America. It's what we call a stated income loan, which doesn't need a US credit score. On my next webinar, I'll explain what that actually means as a foreigner. But the good news is we have got options. It allows us to gear straight away. anywhere. Generally around 65% is the norm for most of our clients. Worst case 50%, best case 75% initially. Once you do have a US credit score and you've put some tax returns in, we can push it up to 80%. So look, there are lots of options. It's I think I've given you a bit of an example now, but certainly listen for our next webinar. If you want some more immediate advice in that area, give us a call and have a chat to you. But certainly within next 4 weeks, we'll have a whole webinar just on financing and how it works and how you can utilize it. Over to you, Sky. I think you've got a few more questions now.
Okay, perfect. Great clarification on that. So we had a couple of questions come in. One of them came in from Jason. Can I use the Australian line of credit to fund a purchase in its entirety? Yeah, it's very similar to paying cash. Obviously, you've got to move the currency into U.S. currency, which we can help you get all that set up and get set up properly here. But yeah, you're basically would be paying cash here and using it for that. So. We've got another question. Some of you, this question may make sense to some of you, maybe not. This will probably be covered on Stephen's webinar on finance. But the question is from Wayne. Hi guys, I'm wondering if you have any info on how the Frank-Dodd Act changes has affected the finance options. Frank-Dodd Act is one of the two primary lending acts that passed here in the United States post GFC. The Frank-Dodd Act has impacted financing. I think the people who wrote the act aren't even sure how it impacted financing. It's one of those politics behind closed doors where they wrote a very long act, and yes, it has had an impact on financing for our international clients. Due to the fact that you already don't have a credit score, you're not scrutinized the same way domestic borrowers are. Here in the U.S., all domestic borrowers are heavily scrutinized as a result of this act, but for most of you, it doesn't have the same impact on you. So,
yeah, that's just to add to that. That's very true. The Frank-Dodd Act hasn't affected foreigners. It's actually made it better for us because it's made it harder for US lenders to lend. And so some of the lenders that we've been used to are now looking at ways to lend to foreigners because the foreigners fall outside the act. So that could actually benefit us in the medium term.
Yep, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So we've got a last question in there from Bird, and Bird, I'm looking to clarify your question a bit. So it says you've got houses sale with a tax assessment on it of $30,000, and I guess if you can clarify your question for me a bit, and I'll move on to another question while you clarify that one more time. So. Daryl texted in, can you use liquidity in an existing U.S. property you own to assist with financing additional investment property? The answer is yes, depending on what that liquidity is. Again, after some of these acts have passed, if first off, if the property is owned outright and you have no debt on it whatsoever, yes, you can. It's that obviously makes it very I shouldn't ever use the word easy and financing in the same sentence, but it makes it easier if it's debt-free. If you have a substantial equity in there, then some lenders will consider doing a cash-out refinance, which are not common here anymore. But Stephen has been able to find a few lenders that are willing to do that. So yeah, depending on the amount of equity in the property or liquidity in the property, is obviously what that will be based on. So
yeah, that's correct, and certainly our next webinar will talk all about that, because that is the question I've got I don't know how many times, 50, 60 times. You can at the moment up to 65% of the value of the property, you can get all the money out to go again, but I'll talk about that further the next webinar.
All right, well, I think we've come to the end for now. We're about 40 minutes in, and we want to be respectful of your time. Again, Stephen or myself would love to talk with you a little bit more one-on-one and help you figure out that baseline criteria for you. So whether that that next deal comes across 1 month from now or 3 months from now, you know when it's the right deal. So that's it for now. We will go ahead and sign off, and thank you everyone for joining us. Have a great one. Cheers. Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks, Guy. All the best, everyone. Hope to speak to you soon.